Hi, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, talking with you today about the idea of fostering self-organizing sanity. And I've got a guiding question for this topic, which I'll explain where it came from in just a minute. But the guiding question is, given that we exist within evolving consciousness, how best can we foster self-organizing sanity on an individual basis that can flourish to become greater than any inferior agenda, scheme, or plan? And where did this come from? This came from me watching an episode of Quartet, which is something that the Arlington Institute puts on every couple of weeks. And it's headed up by John Peterson of the Arlington Institute, and he invites 3 other authors and thinkers and philosophers to join him, who are Penny Kelly, Gregg Braden, and Kingsley Dennis. And so their topic this last time that I was watching had to do with looking ahead at 2024. And right now it's January 2024, and quite a few topics seem like they are threatening to splinter long-standing, stable, seemingly previously stable structures. Let's put it that way. So in the light of all of that, and with the awareness that sometimes there can be some who have a different strategy or goal in mind than you might or your friends might, then how can we be part of the solution and not part of the problem? Really, that's the question. And the reason I'm asking this question is because I really believe strongly in the idea first proposed, I think, by a physicist, and that's John Archibald Wheeler, who talks about this idea. Well, he had lots of great ideas. He had it from bit, the participatory universe, and that's the one, that participatory universe is the one that I'm talking about. Because what Wheeler was suggesting is that when you ask nature a question, when you ask the universe a question, you'll get an answer. And that is the premise by which I ask, how good can it get? And that's how I'm also asking today's question about fostering self-organizing sanity. And if you wonder, why am I focusing on that? Well, let's take a look at a quote by Teilhard de Chardin. And he has this beautiful quote: "Let us keep the discoveries and indisputable measurements of physics, but let us not become bound and fettered to the perspective of final equilibrium that they seem to suggest. A more complete study of the movements of the world oblige us, little by little, to turn it upside down. In other words, to discover that if things hold and hold together, it is only by reason of complexity from above." Love that. That gives me the sense that no matter how crazy things may seem, and they do seem pretty chaotic, everything's going to be all right. And that's exactly what I get when I meditate in these trying times. But anyway, getting back to the topic today, for a variety of reasons, it does seem like things might be running amok. We're being challenged by choices, and maybe a lack of choices in food, health, information, what have you. Pretty much everything and everywhere. And so when we hear for our world leaders, who we would hope to be the voice of sanity, instead calling for war instead of peace, calling for surveillance of individuals rather than transparency of government offices and actions, and calling for enforcement of global health regulations rather than open scientific discussions, those are 3 big areas where we might observe that there appears to be a rift between what maybe you or people you know or love are actually choosing, such as you might choose peace, safety, and love. And it seems like instead what seems to be planned for, and maybe not with our participation, is war, destabilization, and a whole lot of just, I don't know what else to call it, but drama. It's fear and fostering anger and grief and sadness, all that. So getting back to this topic today, what is self-organizing? In the context of chaos theory, it's very interesting. And the word complexity itself comes from the Latin complexus, meaning entwined or embraced. Complex systems are those whose elements are difficult to separate due to interactions between elements. Complexity science aims to better understand and predict behavior of natural systems such as weather systems, volcanic activity, tectonic plate movements, you get the idea, seismic activity, just everything, economic trends, and then just everything having to do with living organisms. So according to this chaos theory, self-organization is occurring within systems that are far from stable. So it sounds counterintuitive at first, right? Like if you've got something chaotic, how would you ever expect to find anything self-organizing amidst all that chaos? But it does happen, and it happens naturally. Some examples of this within the realm of the natural world include crystallization, convection of fluids, chemical oscillation, swarms anytime animals get together, neural circuitry, and even human black markets. So these examples of self-organization are interesting, and you can also see further examples within things like sand grains that form into dunes of sand, chemical reactants join together to create swirling spirals, cells can spontaneously self-organize into tissues, and fish join into schools, birds join into flocks, and so on. And now it gets interesting. Okay, so getting back to the topic, like how do we do? Okay, that's all well and good. So this happens naturally. How can we participate? What can we do? Okay, I want to show you a picture of someone that I know personally, Stuart Kaufman. That's me with Stuart. He was at UC Berkeley, and we were both presenting at the Foundation of Mind conference held at UC Berkeley in August, mid-August 2015. And he's written a number of fascinating books, articles, and so forth. He talks about the idea of adjacent possibles. And this is something that he first wrote about in one of his books, where he said, here he is defining what an actual system is, if you're wondering what's the difference between an adjacent possible and what actually is. Okay, here's Stuart. He says, all the kinds of organic molecules on, within, or in the vicinity of Earth, say, out to twice the radius of the moon. That would be actual. So there's this actual area. And then later, Kaufman differentiated that the actual set was separate from the adjacent possible. That's something nearby that we can think of it in terms of it's being created. It's self-organizing. It's coming together. Now, we haven't quite gotten into how, but he says all these molecular species that are not members of the actual, but are one reaction step away from the actual. Kaufman expanded the context of where we might find these adjacent possibles to the realm of evolving human, social, cultural, and economic systems in his book, Humanity in a Creative Universe. And he was working on that when I was talking with him. He actually stayed with me in August 2015. We had long conversations, wonderful chats. But in this new book that came out, his new book that I'm talking about now, he said, new goods and production capacities are new actuals that are enabling constraints that do not cause, but enable new, typically unprestable, adjacent possible economic opportunities into which the economy flows, creating again new, unprestable, new actuals that enable yet new adjacent possibles. Economic evolution is open-ended, creative, beyond entailing law, and radically emergent. So here he's really bringing up this idea that it's something that's just on the periphery. I talk about that a lot too. This peripheral awareness that when we're sensing something maybe outside of the bubble of reality, the Wigner bubble, this level of conscious agency that we're currently occupying, that we're aware that we're occupying, we can start to sense there's something just outside of that. Okay, so this ties in with some other ideas from chaos theory, which have to do with path dependence and also an idea of strange attractors. And so this adjacent possible is basically a strange attractor when it first shows up, and it's just, we can barely sense it. You might wonder, how do we know that it's there? How can we sense something so subtle? Not to worry, because actually, here I want to quote from Sean O'Neiland. He's the one who was organizing the conference, the Foundation of Mind conference that we were attending. And Sean worked with Walter Freeman. And here he is citing some findings from his research with Walter Freeman, where they were looking into the brain's fractal architecture. So O'Neiland proposes that the brain functions far from thermodynamic equilibrium. We suggest that the brain moves in an extremely high-dimensional state space in a manner facilitated by the fact that it is permeated with self-similarity, both spatial and temporal, time and space. At the spatial level, self-similarity ensures that in fractal fashion, each neuron changes in step with the cortex as a whole. In temporal fashion, self-similarity results in the power spectrum of much slower theta waves, traversing the brain being identical to, if slower than, much faster gamma waves. Several times a second, the brain enters a limit cycle in which it becomes extremely sensitive to incoming stimuli. Therefore, even without mechanisms like stochastic resonance, we humans can detect stimuli as weak as a few photons, or a few parts per billion of scent. The brain is geared to process novelty as it is to process low entropy information. Excellent. So now we got all the pieces coming together. We have this idea. There's an adjacent possible. We can sense it, but now how do we bring it into being? And where's the sanity of which I speak? Okay, not to worry about that either. This is also coming together. It comes through alignment. In this participatory cosmos, there can be advantage in asking those questions that we truly wish to live the answers to. And that's how I started this whole topic today. Again, I'm going to reread that question. Given that we exist within evolving consciousness, how best can we foster self-organizing sanity on an individual basis that can flourish to become greater than any inferior agenda, scheme, or plan? So the sanity that some of us are really longing for will be felt and seen when we sense these adjacent possibles. And who knows where they're going to come from? It could be your neighbor, your family, your friends, somebody that you've never met before, but they're talking sense. How do you recognize this sense? You'll be able to feel these attributes, and you'll be able to reward them with your time, attention, effort, and energy. And what you're looking for are qualities that you most admire, that you most seek to find in the world, such as perhaps honesty, integrity, balance, respect, kindness, wisdom, and love. Those are some that I'd love to see more of. So when we seek those, we find them, we bring them into being. What we're doing is we're voting for this adjacent possible. We're calling it into being. We're saying this now becomes the attractor by which all other thought forms and realities can be founded upon, if they wish, if they sense it. And so to close this out, I just recommend keep asking those excellent questions. If you can't think of the best question to ask, just ask how good can it get. And I would recommend add that to anything else you're looking into, anything you're deciding, thinking about, working on, considering, meditating. It's a great additive to pretty much everything. It is a very unique, strange attractor, and it's going to bring in not something strange, but something wonderful, something optimal, something wonderful indeed for all of us, to find out how good can it get for each and every one of us. Until next time, I love you so very much. This is Cynthia Sue Larson with realityshifters.com.